This is episode 2 of the Between the Rounds boxing podcast with KGP Knockout, also known as Kevin Perry, speaking on what's going on in the world of boxing. Today we're going to be reviewing some of this weekend's action. Actually, Saturday's action for that matter. I already covered Friday's. Mikey Garcia won a pretty significant fight. World champion at 140 pounds, his fourth weight class, the IBF championship bout against Sergey Lipinets. He won a unanimous decision. It was a pretty good fight. He did what he was supposed to do. Considering he was fighting a naturally bigger guy, and he looked pretty damn good doing it. And there's going to be some pretty interesting options for Garcia moving forward. I know he's talking about going back down to 135 pounds and fighting possibly Robert Easter, who's the IBF champion at 135, and possibly Jorge Linares, who is the WBC champion emeritus, and also I believe he's the WBA lightweight champion. And there's also a potential matchup with WBO 130-pound champion Vasyl Lomachenko. All pretty interesting fights. Not sure which one of those happens, but most likely it's going to be Robert Easter because there's going to be the least amount of hurdles making that bout, considering both fight under the PBC and Showtime banner. And Jorge Linares, he's with Golden Boy Promotions, and Vasyl Lomachenko fights on ESPN, and he's handled by Top Rank and Bob Arum. So these promotional hurdles always become a huge issue, and you see guys out there talking about they want to fight this guy and that guy, and for whatever reason these two separate entities cannot come together to make these fights. One hurdle actually obviously is Vasyl Lomachenko fights at 130 pounds, so that's one obstacle. Garcia seems to have not settled into one specific weight class. He's the WBC 135-pound champion. He won that fight, I believe, last year against Dejan Slatikinen, who I believe is from Montenegro. I believe that's in Eastern Europe. He knocked him out, pretty much out cold. And then he hasn't fought at 135 since. So now he's at 140. He's talking about jumping back down to 135, and then he's talking about possibly moving up to 147 pounds. So essentially he's just looking for the biggest potential fights out there. At least that's what he's saying. Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get those fights, because the big fights within his side of the street, which is Showtime, PBC, which is Premier Boxing Champions, the good fights are difficult fights. He was talking about fighting Errol Spence. I don't know how much stock I take in him saying that, but obviously he wants to fight big fights. We'll see if those get made in the near future. Onto the ESPN card, which was a pretty brutal, bloody battle between Oscar Valdez, who's the WBO featherweight champion, that's 126 pounds, against Scott Quigg. I believe he's from Manchester, England. He came in about 2 or 3 pounds overweight. He outweighed Valdez by about 7 pounds, and they fought at StubHub Center in the pouring rain in California in March. So, it was a pretty interesting matchup. And Quigg, that guy, he just looks so much bigger. And I think if he actually would have made 126, he was absorbing a lot of shots that Valdez, who's a big hitter, would have knocked a lot of guys out. And for probably about, Quigg gave a great account of himself. But obviously the weight helped carry him through the bout. And Valdez showed a ton of heart. He had lost a couple teeth. His jaw was broken from midway on. For maybe round 5 or 6, he fought with just blood pouring out of his mouth. Quigg looked like he got in a car accident, like a train wreck. His whole face looked like somebody just stomped on it. His nose looked broken. It was swollen. it's something about the StubHub Center. It used to be the Home Depot Center when I used to go to fights there about maybe 7, 8 years ago. I mean, I've seen some amazing fights there that I've covered. Israel Vasquez against Rafael Marquez. I think I saw all three of them there. I can't remember, but I know I've been to at least, I believe, two of them. Just amazing matches at that place. It just brings the best out of fighters. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the matchups. I remember being live for Antonio Margarito against Paul Williams, which is a really good battle. Tim Bradley versus Ruslan Provodnikov a few years back. I believe that was Fight of the Year. And that was just, I wouldn't say it was a bloodbath, but I mean, it was one of the most brutal fights that I've seen in quite some time. And these guys delivered. They became part of the tradition that StubHub Center has become in boxing. I mean, if you go in there, I mean, it's one of the best live fight atmospheres. I mean, there's not a bad seat in the house. I'd recommend any fight fan, if you've never been to a live boxing event and you live in the Southern California area, that is the area or the venue to go see a fight live. I mean, if you've never seen boxing live before, I mean, you will be hooked on live boxing when you go to that venue. It's easy to go up and get food. You don't have to walk a mile like, some of the bigger arenas. It's an outdoor venue. I mean, it was raining that night, and Valdez actually said at the end he thanked all the fans who came out in the pouring rain to go support him. And that was the positive thing, I think, was people went out of their way to be outside in the rain to see a fight. And if you wanted to be out in the rain and see a fight, this was the one, because, I mean, it definitely delivered. And Oscar Valdez really showed a lot of heart, a lot of grit. He still showed a lot of flaws, but I think that is kind of the part of his appeal is he gets hit, but he throws with just ferocity every time he goes in there. He's looking for the knockout. And in this era of safety first fighters, which there's nothing wrong with that, it's kind of refreshing to see a young fighter go out there and really try to put on a show. And I don't think that's for a lack of ability he fights that way. I think he's got a lot of passion when he goes in there. And but it's passion and craft at the same time. And he was fighting a guy that I just think was such a bigger guy. Maybe not a naturally bigger fighter, but he definitely had a weight advantage that Valdez didn't have. And when you're the guy that's trying to make weight, I'm not saying that Scott Quigg didn't try to make the weight, but I think it takes a little more when to take off those extra 2-3 pounds. Quigg said the pounds wouldn't just come off. So either you take him at his word or you think that he was trying to get an unfair advantage. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle there. I think he probably felt that if he would have made more of an effort to take the pounds off, he would have been too weak or whatnot, and it would have diminished his performance. So in that sense, I kind of understand where he's coming from, because obviously when you go in there, you want to perform at your best. So two great fights this weekend. Looking into the near future, actually we'll talk about that on the next show, but I just definitely wanted to cover these two excellent fights over the weekend. There were some other undercard bouts. Actually, probably the most significant undercard bout on there was a Showtime Extreme, and on the undercard was Alejandro Luna against Richard Comey, and they're fighting to be the mandatory for Robert Easter. And it was a pretty good scrap. 6 rounds. Luna is a undefeated prospect, and Comey is a good contender from Ghana, and his only losses were to Robert Easter, and he had one other loss to I can't remember off the top of my head the fighter's name, but that was also a close bout. But he looked pretty impressive in winning that bout. So great weekend of boxing, and I'll see you next time. Subscribe to my channel. I'm going to keep trying to make videos every few days, and look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments section.